I guess some people could look at that and think all of a sudden we were in the big real estate acquisition mode. It spread out over such a period of time. I don't think we were. If you put them all together, it sounds like that's all we wanted to do is go out and buy property. I never considered us in the real estate business, but when you take each one of those acquisitions and you look at the context in which the jury found itself at the time, and what was available, what was not available, what the need was, I think each one of them made great sense. There were things that you didn't mention. The Public Works facility over at East Maintenance, we were able to negotiate that with the Port of Lake Charles by simply doing a trade-off of building the road into their industrial park in exchange for us having property to build a new Public Works facility at a perfect location, easy access to interstate and other accesses. But I guess starting with the Magnolia building purchase, we got wind in the early 1990s that the Magnolia Life Insurance Company, they had sold out to, I think it was Liberty Insurance out of either South or North Carolina. And what Liberty really wanted from Magnolia Life was their policies. They didn't really want the real estate. They were not interested in having a real estate holding in Calcasieu Parish. They wanted the policies that they had and the premiums that were going to come as a result of that. So they really wanted to get rid of their real estate. I still don't know which law firm, but there was a law firm that was looking at trying to buy this building at the time and simply wasn't able to raise the capital to do it. So I got together with a few members of the police jury. We talked about the fact that here, we owned primarily these two blocks with the exception of the Magnolia building and the parking garage that was adjacent to it. The jury had many years before, back in the early 70s, considered they had an opportunity to buy the building at that time and turned it down. They didn't have the money to do it. So anyway, we built an interest among jurors in trying to go ahead and buy this so as to complete our ownership, which would do several things. Number one, it increased our parking availability, which was huge. The second thing it did was to create the possibility that as the court system, which seemed to be at the time the system that was growing faster than other arenas in local and parish government, it would give a place for expansion of that without having to go into the construction of another building, tying up another piece of land, and which was precious because the land was parking, and to go build a building on land that was used for parking created a parking problem. So anyway, we in negotiating with them, it became apparent that Liberty wanted out of here. And so we were able to buy the building for right at $850,000, and once we closed on that, we were able to convince them that they really didn't need to move all the furniture out of here, and we were able to buy the furniture that was in the building for 10 cents on the dollar. So it became a really, really good deal, and probably one of the better deals in the last half a century that any local government was able to benefit the taxpayers with. Obviously, the building has been used by parish offices, some court offices, the sheriff's office. Private tenants, for the first probably 10 years of our ownership, private tenants paid rent that paid for the operation and maintenance of the building so that it never cost anything. Now, as more public offices go in there, there's more of the maintenance tab that's being paid by the public sector, but the public sector really didn't have to pay to build a building. I mean, at the time that we paid $850,000 for it, the dirt that it sat on was estimated and appraised at about $750,000. So it was really one of those deals that how could you say no to that possibility? The next one that you mentioned, next acquisition, was the Brown Lake Park acquisition. That property had a little different story, but similar circumstances in that it was available for development, and there was a condo plan that was put in place there that ended up going south on the investors, and it fell into bankruptcy. So we actually, the members of the jury, myself, began talking about the possibility to expand the 7 acres that we had that was known as Brown Lake Park at the time into this additional 19 or 20 acres that was available to create a really flagship recreational facility like this area had not known. And so our vision for that was, I think, pretty much what has turned out. Although at that time, while we had the money, going back to the gaming thing we talked about earlier, the gaming money was available to buy the land. We really didn't have any money to develop it. But there were other people looking at the land, and had we not been able to buy it when we did out of bankruptcy, I think it would have been lost to maybe a few, very few individual landowners that would have held the land in private development for themselves, which of course they would have a right to do, but which at the same time would have prevented perhaps one of the most beautiful sites, certainly one of the best places to see a beautiful sunrise anywhere, a sunset anywhere in Calcasieu Parish. And that would have been lost forever. So the jury, at some degree of political risk, I think, by spending a little over $3 million to buy a piece of land for which they didn't have necessarily a game plan or a revenue stream to develop, there was a little political risk in doing that. But as with most things, time has shown that that was a wonderful vision for the police jury to have at the time, because of what they have been able to do in development of the park, and all the accolades that the parish has received since the development of the park, and the number of people, the hundreds, thousands of people that are able to utilize that during their leisure time. I think it's proven to be a really good decision. I guess the next decision was the one that I hope that a decade or so from now people will be able to look at and say, boy, I'm glad the police, what would we do, what would we have done had the jury not done that? And that's the purchase of the 901 building, the former Louisiana Savings Building. That building was immediately adjacent to the north side of the parish-owned property just north of Kirby Street, and had a huge amount of land adjacent to it that was either owned by the people that owned the building or was under lease to them with a guarantee right to purchase at the conclusion of that lease, so that it was that huge amount of land and parking we were eyeballing that because of what we knew the city's plans were for the Civic Center. Right now, at that time, we had 200 spaces allotted for prospective petty jurors to park across the street from the Judicial Center at the Civic Center. Well, the city's plans had already put us on notice that was going away. As soon as they did the development they had planned, there was going to be no parking available over there. So we were scrambling. We were looking at different places. We were looking at perhaps acquiring a piece across from the DA's office on Ryan Street, building a new DA's office over there. The DA's office had become obsolete in terms of its amount of space for what was being conducted, the business was being conducted there then. So the building seemed to be an answer to some prayers about how we would solve several of those problems: the DA space problem, the parking problem that was going to be created that was already existing, but that was going to be exacerbated by the Civic Center issue. So we found out about that in kind of a left-handed way, that a group of local businessmen were attempting to purchase the building from Sprint, who had bought the building in terms of their takeover of U.S. Unwired. And we found out about that and actually made a run at Sprint and to try to buy the building kind of out from under this local investor group. And I thought made a pretty attractive offer to them, but Sprint decided against selling to us. They were afraid that the work that they had done with this other group might generate a lawsuit from that group. Sprint, not unlike Liberty Insurance at the time, wanted out of the real estate market that they had here. They were not interested in that. And so they wanted to get out of that building. They only had a handful of tenants in it at the time, so it was costing them money to keep it open and to continue owning it. So anyway, they went on and sold to this other group, which we then turned around and said, well, we still need the building. If it was a good idea yesterday before they sold it to them, it's still a good idea today. What's it going to take for us to buy the building? And we had an appraisal done, and we made an offer to that group that was just under the appraised value of it. And because we felt obviously we couldn't pay more than the appraised value, and they took it. Well, that group walked away with a little bit of a windfall that upset some people locally about it, and I understand that just on the surface, not understanding the underlying context of the need and what all was there. One of the little pieces of information about that got lost in the shuffle was that just prior to this group buying the building from Sprint, they had negotiated a purchase of the land under the building from two individuals here that really were not necessarily interested in even selling. They had owned the land under that building from the day it was built. Even when Louisiana Savings built the building, they were paying lease on the land it was built, which you wouldn't do much of that today, but that's what they did. They agreed to that plan back when Louisiana Savings was built, and I'm not sure about the decision-making at the time to do that, but that was in their wisdom to do it. Well, this group that bought the building, the group from whom we purchased the building, had closed the deal on the land underneath. So they had done something that, in my opinion, very few people, if any, could have accomplished, and that was consolidating the ownership of the land with the building. That was huge. And we would have perhaps had a difficult time doing that, because these two individuals that owned the land really didn't. They were happy to continue to draw monthly lease checks, so that was huge for them to be able to consolidate the ownership of both of those. And so it was subsequent to that we were able to buy the building. We were kind of under the gun. They wanted to close before the end of the year. We closed on December 31st, New Year's Eve, because of tax consequences to them.